Welcome to another SkyWalker commentary, people. Today, I want to clear up some of the things that history has obscured, and this time in the life of Marcus Garvey and the story around his connections with the Manleys and Bustamante. Because black people, including Rastafari, are so gullible. Let's talk about the family that buried Marcus Garvey before Seaga dug him up. Let's talk about that. Marcus Mosiah Garvey was not just a man. He was a movement, a vibration, a spiritual architect of black sovereignty. His voice echoed across continents, calling for unity, self reliance, and the reclamation of African dignity. He did not say that we should trust every white man that hated him, that slaughtered Rastafari, or that stole his manifesto and walked around talking about he got a rod of correction from Selassie. One family of colonial blood, and their mission was not to promote our Marcus, although Rastafari believes so because black people are gullible, including Rastafari. But in the land of his birth, Jamaica, Garvey was not honored in life. He was not uplifted in death. He was buried not just in London soil, but in Jamaican silence. This is not a commentary of accusation. It is a ritual of restoration because the ones who buried Garvey were strangers. They were kids, cousins, sons, rulers. The political dynasty of Bustamante, Norman Manley, and Michael Manley, three men who governed Jamaica from opposite sides of the political fence, but moved in sync when it came to suppressing Garvey and co-opting Rastafari. Yet, for some strange reason, Rastafari chose to be their working vessels. Instead of the defenders against those that hated the prophet, they all hated the prophet. And the man who dug Garvey up was not a cousin, but Rastafari hated him because he was white. That is the irony. Seaga was not a descendant of colonialists, but an outsider, a man born in Boston who chose Jamaica, not inherited it. Edward Seaga, the one who broke the silence, the one who built the shrine. Let us begin with the bloodline. Alexander Bustamante and Norman Manley were cousins, both descended from Elsie Hunter. Their shared ancestry did not prevent them from ruling Jamaica as rivals, but when it came to Marcus Garvey hate, they were aligned in silence. Bustamante, the populist, presided over some of the most brutal crackdowns against Rastafari, beatings, arrest, public humiliation. His disdain was overt. He saw Rasta as a threat to order and Garvey as a threat to control. And you know that Garvey was the Rastafari reason to be here. Norman Manley, the legalist, clashed with Garvey in 1934 over a gas station dispute. But the real fight was ideological. It wasn't just about that gas thing. Norman was a Rhodes Scholar, trained in British law and colonial diplomacy. He was the British mole and premier here in Jamaica. The British loved when the mole was their own bloodline. So wherever you have a British in Jamaica, that's the one they're gonna do their best to have rule. Garvey was a radical, a visionary, a man who spoke of black sovereignty and African redemption. Norman chose empire over uprising. He chose a British constitution for British slaves and fought Marcus tooth and nails for trying to find it out. And when Garvey died, Norman said nothing, no tribute, no honor, just silence. His intention to silence the name in the annals of history and maintain the status quo for the British. He wanted the British to control, and Marcus was in his way, whether alive or dead. Michael Manley, Norman's son, inherited not just political power but spiritual proximity. He did not openly attack Garvey. He did something more dangerous. He eclipsed him. He eclipsed him. And people, he did it by the use of sorcery. Sorcery simply means mind science used for evil. Michael Manley was charismatic. He spoke in liberation tones. He traveled to Ethiopia and claimed to have received a rod from Haile Selassie, a ritual object revered by Rastafari. Said it was a rod of correction. He returned to Jamaica and claimed to be Joshua with the rod of correction. The people bowed, the Rastas rejoiced. They saw him as a bridge between Babylon and Zion. I don't know how come. Black people are too gullible, including Rastafari, because you see it, a Jehovah Jesus, right? Beneath the surface, a different ritual was unfolding. Michael allegedly borrowed Garvey's manifesto. Let's use that word for now. His economic blueprint, his social vision, and used it to build political traction. He spoke of equality, of empowerment, of justice, but he did not credit Garvey. He did not implement Garvey's model of black economic independence. Instead, he built a pork barrel system, state dependency, handouts, contracts for loyalty. The rod was not correction, it was control. It was a destabilizing rod. And destabilization is what the British need to maintain for any party that breaks away people. For that reason, he was hailed as one who came with good ideas. He always came up with good ideas, but was no good at implementing. That was a misconception, though. Michael Manley was, on the contrary, a good implementer. He implemented what he wanted to implement. Like, for example, the housing trust, as used to build PNP strongholds, but not to serve the people, are hardly so for decades. For decades, the housing trust wasn't even helping much anyway. So it wasn't even fulfilling the dreams or the goals of Marcus Garvey. Manly mold the system and the culture by pinning the evil to perpetual motion. For example, what do I mean by that? This which guaranteed that complete communities would vote PNP for decades and that strong arm influencers would always be in close proximity for many years to come. This is how he tied everything together, right? This was sorcery, not in mystical sense, but in the symbolic way. Michael kept Rasta close, praised Haile Selassie, and wore the cloak of liberation because you know Rasta represent grassroots and true Rasta him a win the people. But he did not walk with Garvey. He walked over him. A Rasta helped him. He used Rasta's grassroots power to win elections. He claimed the spiritual authority of Haile Selassie and he positioned himself as a liberator while Garvey remained a stranger in his own land. He used Haile Selassie's name and raised himself above Marcus and the lips and by support of Rastafari, supporting those that hated the prophet. That's what he did. Michael Manley win politics with gangs people. And this was ingenious. Why in Africa, the colonial powers had to recruit terrorists and arm the state forces less than these terrorists in order to create the chaos, destabilization to control by. In Jamaica, by doing this with the gangsters, are, are giving the gangsters a role in their politics, it automatically created a forever destabilization, that the country would forever be dragged down by crime and give Britain that perpetual window of control or, let's say, a loophole. In the 1970s, partisan violence exploded, communities became garrisons, political enclaves ruled by party aligned badmen. Elections were no longer contests of ideas, they were battles of firepower, allegiances were rewarded with housing, contracts, and protection, even almost like they got the right to be extortioners. The ballot box was guarded by gunmen. Many JLP residents found that their houses were literally taken and given to PNP loyalists. It was fully blood and fire people. As I said, it is a colonial pattern. This mirrored colonial tactics used in Africa, proxy violence to maintain control, the illusion of democracy past a ritual of fear, and the people paid the price. Always. Jamaica's democracy was never designed to be peaceful. It was designed to be manageable for England, and the blueprint, it wasn't Jamaican, it was British. The dynasty didn't just suppress Garvey, they destabilized the nation. They used fear as governance and they buried the prophet beneath political performance. Now we turn to the man who broke the silence, Edward Seaga. Born in Boston, Seaga was not Jamaican by birth, but he became Jamaican by choice. He renounced his US citizenship without coaxing. He fell in love with the culture, the music, the spirit, and he did what the bloodline refused to do. He honored Marcus Garvey, and in a way that would keep his legacy as ensign for generations to come. Yet, Rastafari hated him, sometimes even more than they hated Bustamante. For real. In 1964, Seaga led the effort to repatriate Garvey's body from London. He organized a national ceremony. 30,000 people attended. Trees were covered in bodies, witnesses to a resurrection people. Seaga delivered a tribute that framed Garvey not as a Jamaican figure, but as a global prophet. Garvey's stage was not Jamaica, he said. It was the continent of colored peoples. He enshrined Garvey as Jamaica's first national hero. He built the shrine that the dynasty refused to build. He gave Garvey a place in the national pantheon. Seaga didn't inherit Jamaica, he chose it, and he chose to honor the prophet. But what did the Manleys and Bustamante choose? People, the archives must speak. The archives must speak. Today, Marcus Garvey is taught in schools, but not enough. Not enough. His legacy is referenced, but not revered. His vision is quoted, but not implemented. The family that buried him still cast shadows over Jamaica's political imagination. Bustamante is remembered as a labor hero, Norman as a founding father, Michael as a liberator, but none of them lifted Garvey. None of them built the shrine. None of them carried the rod with truth. Edward Seaga, the outsider, did more for Garvey's legacy than the bloodline ever did, and that contradiction must be named, not to shame, but to restore. This is not just commentary, it is ritual correction, it is ancestral reckoning, it is the archives speaking people. Bustamante used brute force, Norman used legal silence, Michael used symbolic sorcery, and Seaga, an outsider, built the Dagon shrine. Let the record be restored. Let the silence be broken. Let the prophet rise. Marcus Garvey lives not because Jamaica remembered him, but because one man refused to forget. Archive that SkyWalker style. This was your SkyWalker no nonsense commentary, people. Thanks for watching.